Hello. So the reason that I'm here today is actually because of something that happened about a year ago that I'd like to tell you about. I was on Twitter, and a friend of mine from the East Coast who works with adults who have special needs posted something that immediately grabbed my attention. And what she said was, "When will comedians learn the R word isn't funny?" And having a younger brother with severe autism, I knew instantly what she meant because the kids in my neighborhood made fun of my brother Mario because he was autistic. So I responded back publicly on Twitter, and I said, "I know exactly what you mean. I have a brother who has autism." And as is prone to happen in social networks, I got a response from a stranger. And she sent me a series of private messages that said, "Alicia, I know you don't know who I am, but I have a son who has Asperger's, and I have a daughter who's healthy, and I don't know how to help my healthy daughter. Would you be willing to share your story with me?" And I'd love to tell you that my instant response was, "Yes, please, let's get together as quickly as we can." And actually my reaction was, "Oh, no way." No, because my story is not a fun story to tell, and it's not a fun story to hear. It's not one of these things where my friends say, "Hey, Alicia, why don't you and your husband come over for cocktails and tell us about your childhood trauma?" That doesn't happen. But even though I was instantly very hesitant, I knew that this was something important to do, and I sensed that there was a purpose in this. So we met. 2.5 hours later, we were laughing, we were crying, and I, in fact, did share with her some of the most traumatic experiences of my youth, and we have become wonderful friends since. She said something to me recently. She said, "Alicia, because of your willingness to share your story with me, I have forever changed the way I parent my daughter. And because of that, my daughter's life is forever changed." And I thought, wow, if by sharing my story with one person, one child's life is forever changed, then perhaps by sharing my story with many people, many children's lives will be forever changed. Many glass children's lives. So, what the heck is a glass child? I first heard this term about 1.5 years ago, and I want you to know that I did search long and hard to try to find the person who originated the term, and I couldn't. So for now, anonymously, the definition of a glass child is a healthy kid who has a special needs brother or sister, a special needs sibling. And I think it's important just for a moment to talk about, at least for the purposes of this discussion today, what special needs means. You may typically think of someone with a mental or a physical disability, and that's true. Those are people who have special needs. But today, it's something a little bit broader than that. A child with special needs is a child who requires ongoing attention and care, kind of above and beyond what we would consider normal parenting to be. So that could be someone with a mental or a physical disability. It could also be a child who is an addict. Perhaps they're addicted to drugs or alcohol, even to food. Could be a child who's engaged in criminal activity, a child who maybe has a short-term severe illness or perhaps even a chronic and long-term illness. This is how we'll look at special needs today. So with that definition in mind, I'm wondering how many of you know of a family that has a special needs child? And since I can't see you and the people who are live streaming can't see you, could you clap for just a minute? Wow. That is a lot of people, which is very exciting to me because that means that right here in this room, we have an army of people who can significantly change the trajectory of a glass child's life. So, why glass? Why not titanium or plastic? Well, you may think it's because glass children are fragile and they break very easily, but the reality is we are some of the strongest children there are. We have to be in order to survive the things that we have survived. We are called glass children because our parents are so consumed with the needs of our brothers and sisters that when they look at us, they look right through us as though we're made of glass. That's what a glass child is. You see, we're very sensitive to the needs of our parents and of our siblings. And we love our mothers and fathers and our brothers and sisters. And we know that the problems that we have, the things that we face, are insignificant compared to what our parents are dealing with and our siblings are dealing with. So we're very quiet. We become caretakers of the family. And that's my story. So I am the oldest of 3 children, and my youngest brother, Mario, was born in the 70s. He has autism pretty severely, and back in the 70s, nothing was known about autism. And my parents only knew that at 2 years of age, there was something wrong with Mario. They didn't know what it was, so they took him to pediatricians around Chicago, which is where we lived at the time. And the pediatricians didn't know what was wrong with Mario either, but instead of saying that, they said, well, it's your fault. Your son's behaving abnormally and he was developing normally. You did something wrong. And even at 2 years of age, Mario was violent towards himself. And so one of the pediatricians actually accused my mom and dad of child abuse. And those of you who are parents, I think, can appreciate the frustration and the heartbreak that they felt trying to get help for their son and being told that it was their fault. So, unfortunately, Mario didn't receive a diagnosis until he was 13 years old. And what that meant is that my parents had to figure out how to help him the best that they could without any expertise or any other involvement. So it led to some funny things. Mario had a really interesting way of eating at the dinner table. You see, he learned this from watching the great international master of dinner table etiquette that we all know as Cookie Monster. Mario was a huge fan of Sesame Street, so he thought it was perfectly acceptable to sit at the table and kind of use his hands and scoop up all the food and go except instead of cookie crumbs, it was mashed potatoes, gravy, and peas that kind of went everywhere. Mario wasn't toilet trained until he was 11. I'll let that sink in for a minute. And the older Mario became, the stronger he became, and the more violent he became towards himself and towards us. He was a whirlwind of destruction in our home. You could walk into our apartment and see in the walls holes that he had put there either through his fist or his head, sometimes us, and chairs, dishes, anything that was handy that he could throw, he threw. That meant for me as a little girl, all the things that I had were ruined by my brother. My books, my toys, my stuffed animals. There wasn't anything I owned that he did not somehow break. But his violence was the toughest part for all of us. My mom, to this day, 20 plus years later, bears the marks of my brother up and down her arms. And you can see the perfectly formed indentations of teeth from when my brother bit her. So when I was, in fact, one of the pediatricians had asked my mom, it was when I was 5 years old, to keep a diary of Mario's behavior. And so we found it a couple of years ago and saw page after page of Mario hit Alicia X times today. He punched her this number of times today. He bit her this number of times today. When I was 6, my youngest brother David was born. Cutest kid you ever saw. He was born with a terminal disease called T-cell anemia. And some of you might remember the boy in the plastic bubble. That's what my brother David had. He was born without an immune system. And the doctors said that he would live until he was 2. He lived until he was 4. Unfortunately, most of his short life was spent in the hospital. So what that meant in our home was my father usually was the one who was trying to care for my brother Mario with the autism, trying to care and control him. And my mother was at the hospital caring for David. And there I was, taking care of myself. And I was a good little girl. From 6 to 10, I was a good little girl. I didn't have problems. I made great grades in school. I did whatever mom and dad needed me to do because that was my job. That is what I did. That is what glass children do. And when my brother David died, I was almost 11. It was at that point in my life that I first started to plan how to kill myself. But here's the thing. No one knew. My parents didn't know. They had no idea how much I was hurting inside. My teachers didn't know. My friends didn't know. No one had a clue about how much I wanted to die. Because again, that was my job. You see, glass children take on these caretaker responsibilities. And naturally, we are conditioned not to have any problems. We are supposed to be perfect. When someone asks us how we're doing, the answer is always, I'm doing fine. The reason that I want to share this with you is because you have an opportunity to make a massive difference in the lives of a glass child, in the lives of a family that has a special needs child. And I have two messages. I have one for the parents. Parents, this may be really tough for you to hear, but please hear this. You cannot take for granted the emotional health of your children. Every emotion that you feel, whether it's pain, whether it's anger, frustration, fear, concern, crises of faith that you are experiencing because of your special needs child, your healthy child feels all of it too, but with the coping skills of a child. So when you ask your healthy child, are you okay? And they say, yes, Mommy, I'm fine. Do not believe them. They are not fine. How can they be fine if they are experiencing what you are experiencing as a child? And folks, I get it. I saw what my parents went through. They didn't have the capacity. They didn't have the tools. They were barely making it on their own. So parents, find a place for your child to get help. You send them to counseling. You find a support group for them. Find a safe place where they can go and talk about their feelings and get some tools so they know how to cope and they know what to do. Because otherwise, the patterns that they learn are going to repeat themselves through adulthood. That's thing one for parents. The second thing I want to say to parents is, make sure that your children know that you love them unconditionally. And that doesn't just mean telling them I love you. It means they understand that they are valued just by the simple fact that they are breathing and alive. Because you see, we believe our value is based on how well we perform, on how well we take care of the people in our family. And 3, for parents, I know this is tough. I did not spend time alone by myself with my mother and father until I was 13 years of age, and I needed it. A glass child's life is all about that sibling. Find a way to spend time alone with that child without the special needs sibling there. Community, gosh, we need you. These families need you. I'm going to tell you what not to do because this is something that happened to me. Well-meaning adults would see me when I was 6 or 7, and they'd say to me, Alicia, you need to be a good girl for Mommy and Daddy. They're taking care of Mario. They're taking care of David. So you do whatever you can to make Mommy and Daddy happy. And I did. And I did. The brightest spots in my childhood when people outside of our family invited me into their homes, took me with them on vacation. You know what? Not even that. When they just paid attention to me, when they came over to the house and they asked me how I was doing. I have a friend who helped with a fundraiser for a child with a disability, and we'll just say that child's name is Michael. And my friend said, Alicia, help me understand why this topic is so important. And I looked at my friend and I said, what is Michael's brother's name? And he didn't know. Community, you will probably not hear this again, but let me just say to you, you're normal. Isn't that great? You're normal. And special needs families need that from you. You may be struggling with the decision of where to send your child to school. Some of these families are struggling with, do I send my daughter to an institution to save my marriage, or do I allow her to stay at home and see what happens? Do I allow my son who is addicted to drugs to be homeless, or do I bring him home and continue to enable this behavior? We need you. Invite these families to your home for holidays, and they're going to fight. They're going to give you a whole list of reasons about why they can't or why they shouldn't. Don't accept those answers. And when you ask someone with a special needs family how they are, and they tell you they're fine, don't believe them either. So I want to conclude with thought. So wind. Wind is something that's very interesting to me. And I think we all understand what hurricane force wind or what tornadic wind looks like and what it can do. But have you ever thought about 1 mile per hour wind? Well, I did. And I called a meteorologist, and he kind of laughed at me and said, Alicia, 1 mile per hour wind? Come on, that's nothing. In fact, we call that near calm. And I said, okay, but what does it look like? And he said, you would have to be looking at a field of grass, and at the precise moment that this 1 mile per hour wind blew, you would see a blade of grass just slightly sway. That is 1 mile per hour wind. Now hold that thought for just a moment. Back in June, my mom and I were rummaging through some of her old drawers, and we found something. My mother has been doing cross-stitch as long as I can remember, and she does such a beautiful job. But we were going through these drawers, and we found this. And I opened it, and it was a birth announcement for my brother David. And I will show this to the camera. It may not be real easy for you to see, but there's red pen marked all over this. And guys, when I opened this up, it immobilized me because I realized I was holding in my hand the symbol of my childhood. My childhood was about the birth and the death of my brother David and about the destruction that my brother Mario caused. Here's the thing about 1 mile per hour wind. Did you know that the briefest gust can change the trajectory of a bullet by up to 15 inches? 1 mile per hour wind that just ever so slightly bends a blade of grass can change the trajectory of a bullet by up to 15 inches. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to encourage you to be a brief gust of gentle, near calm, 1 mile per hour wind in the life of a glass child, and you will change their trajectory forever, so that no child ever has to say, this was the symbol of my youth.